The 2017 Pittsburgh Retro Game Con reminded me of everything I hate about gaming conventions and cities in Pennsylvania. It also instilled in me a sharp realization of what retro collecting has become. Not that there was anything wrong with the show. It was staffed accordingly, advertised adequately, ran appropriately. It was a very well put together convention. The issues arose more from the con-goers than the convention staff itself. Let me start from the beginning. After a very long car ride, I arrived at the convention and expeditiously entered the washroom, leaving my effects in the bar outside the con hall. Upon my return, I discovered that my tie, a true gem of my collection, was no longer with my belongings, and had quite obviously been stolen by some passerby. Despite being flustered by the impending debacle a tieless appearance would have on my interviews, I calmed down and reminded myself that in the Steel City, business casual is considered formal attire. My crew and I proceeded to attempt to film an opening for the episode in an alley behind the convention. Using the row of overfilled dumpsters as a visual metaphor for the burg was too good to pass up. However, while filming, a member of my crew was struck by an oblivious truck driver who was backing into the alley. With our shot of the alley now blocked and my visionary introduction ruined, we decided to instead film in the entrance to the con hall. More than miffed by this rapid series of unfortunate events, I immediately began a hasty yet futile attempt to recover my stolen tie. I berated person after person in my quest for fashionable redemption, but to no avail. No one had seen my tie, its luscious green tones, its expressionist design, its coarse texture that reminded me of my relationship with my parents. Realizing that Korea had better chances at reunification than I did, I dropped my search and began to experience what the con had to offer. Even though I proceeded to interview people as usual, an awareness began to envelop me. I began comprehending this convention in ways that I had not done at previous events. I studied my surroundings, noticed acute details that I normally would just glance over. It was during this surreal moment that I noticed I was surrounded by hipsters. Intrigued by my newfound consciousness, I began to observe these hipsters as they shuffled through the crowded convention floor. I listened to their conversations with fellow gaming enthusiasts. I watched their purchases, noting what games they were buying and which games they were not. It quickly occurred to me that these hipsters were not gamers in the sense that you and I are, but that they are a different breed of gamer, a less experienced gamer, a weekend warrior, if you will. These are the casual gamers, whose nostalgia for a simpler time when they played Mario Kart at their friend's house after school has driven them into this hobby in force. While not a dominant demographic at larger conventions, smaller venues like this Pittsburgh one cater quite well to those hipsters who yearn only for a taste of gaming culture to satisfy the sentimental desires of their bygone youth. A short while into my musings, I ran into my good friend Bill. You probably know him as AlphaOmegaSin, but you aren't on a first-name basis like he and I are, like we are, you know. After the usual masculine exchange of dick jokes, Bill mentioned a game that he was interested in playing. However, he said he was not willing to pay market value for it and would just emulate it instead. It then dawned on me how penetrative the hipster movement into retro collecting had advanced, to the point where it even drives people like Bill, with their hundreds of thousands of subscribers and steady stream of ad revenue away from collecting and into emulating. Speaking of ad revenue, I don't get much, but I do have a Patreon. Sign up and help me, your humble correspondent, continue to make mediocre content that only a handful of people care about. Pledge monthly, $5, $1,000, whatever you prefer. Reflecting on what my precious hobby was slowly turning into, I was faced with the two most evolutionary choices a Homo sapien can make, fight or flight. I chose flight. I promptly left the convention hall and embarked on a contemplative journey through the streets of Pittsburgh. While taking in the abstract beauty of inner-city poverty, my attempt to flee from my issues with hipsters was reawakened by the imposing gentrification I witnessed in this neighborhood. I began to understand that this wasn't a problem I could just run away from, but rather it was a problem that we as the community have to come to grips with, and tolerate, for better or worse, despite whatever inclinations we have against it. You dig?